Alright everyone, it's time for a special video here because we do have new inflation numbers for the US and the numbers, they aren't that good. This came in actually right as I was ending my live stream because I had things that I had to do for the last hour. Right as I'm ending, about 5 minutes beforehand, new US inflation data comes in. Now the expectation above the 8.7 that inflation was already at, which is already historically very high. It was a 40-year record already. Generally, like the Financial Times and the Krugmans of the world, they expected it to tick up, but only a little bit, like to 8.8. I thought that it would go to 8.9, a little bit higher than they were expecting. It's gone to 9.1%, so it is well beyond expected. This is a surge in inflation. Remember that Joe Biden was taking credit for a 0.1 reduction in inflation only a few months ago, which I correctly predicted would not last, unfortunately, and things will get worse. Here's the reason why. When we look at inflation, and this is just the core inflation number that you're getting, the real inflation number, if you were to measure it like they did in the 70s under Carter, would already be well into the double-digit range. Unfortunately, the inflation rate is already sky high. We arguably are going to get stagflation at some point because, I mean, can people continue spending as much money when the prices are rising this quickly, well ahead of wages? This is even worse than before. And so employers, naturally, they make less money. Therefore, they consider cutting jobs. If you get rising joblessness, along with inflation above an arbitrary number, 5-6%, and we're well above that, you have stagflation. We haven't had that since the 1970s. I would argue that under the old Carter measurements, our inflation rate is, 15% or thereabouts. This is just the core inflation. Here's the problem. A lot of that inflation is the result of food. Gas prices are a big part of it. Travel and certain other things. Energy in general. And Biden hasn't done any favors by attacking the U.S. energy industry. The problem is that we're about to get the harvest. Now, normally, you will automatically see the price of food goods rise and fall according to season because of when those foods are grown, when they're more available. So you have the summer, you have the spring sowing, you have the summer growing, and then you have, the late summer, early fall harvest for a lot of crops in a lot of the temperate zones of the world, which disproportionately grow a lot of the grains, corn, wheat, sorghum, etc. That is used as feed for meat and so forth. The problem is that right now fertilizer prices are sky high in the United States because of the Ukraine war, the sanctions on Russia. Russia retaliated not by blocking fertilizer shipments, but by gently encouraging certain companies to throttle those shipments, and the people of India and China are buying them anyway, so they don't really care. And so farmers are paying much more for that. On top of that, you've got much higher diesel costs. Well, the diesel is used to run the tractor. It's used to run the combine harvester. It's used to run a plethora of different machines and vehicles on the average farm. When that comes to bear, which is not yet evident, that's not even reflected in this inflation data. It won't even begin to be reflected until the very ass end of this month through August and September. That will drive the food prices, in my opinion, much higher. I don't see much gas price relief in sight. Nothing has really changed to cause that. You have the freeing up of oil from the strategic reserve marginally lowering it. You have the gas tax holiday, but that's a one-off thing. You can't make a negative gas tax holiday. You can't say, well, we're going to start pumping taxpayer dollars into the price of gas to lower it even further. I mean, you could, in theory, if you had a bill, but nobody would vote for it. What more can possibly be done to stop the inflation rate? The only answer is that the Fed can raise interest rates. What's the problem with them raising the interest rates further? You slow down the economy, you potentially cause a lack of investment, and then you potentially cause stagflation by overshooting. I think that's the most likely outcome, unfortunately, at this time. The fact is that even mainline economists who were already a bit gloomy about the economic situation didn't expect 9.1% inflation. I'm a pessimist about the Biden economy, a big pessimist. I warned that if he was elected, or Hong Kong selected, that there would be economic problems, considerable ones. I didn't expect it to get nearly this bad, and I certainly didn't expect month over month a 0.4 increase in inflation. We've got some real big problems. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Congress is greenlighting more bills to send billions and billions in taxpayer dollars to Ukraine, helping to cause the fertilizer crisis, which will come home to roost in the next couple of months, by the way. You have a government that is completely out of control, completely out of the loop, run by people who have, in some cases, never been part of the working or even middle class. And that's really become a problem. You have a silver spoon government under Joe Biden. You have an asterisk administration run by a man who's clearly inbred and demented, and his trailer trash family. You have a bunch of people around him who are silver spooners. And by and large, they either don't know what it's like to be the average American, or they've forgotten because of age and or dementia issues like Joe has. This is causing some issues. Link in the description, archived of course. This was the initial hot take on the inflation numbers. Again, I was expecting it to tick up. I did not expect it to hit 9.1. I'm a pessimist about Bidenomics. I didn't expect it to hit 9.1%. What does that say about the fucking economy? It's getting worse and it's getting worse. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. We have an administration now that, because the economy is so poor and because the Democrats punted on abortion basically, has reverted to gun control as a midterm issue. I can't wait to see what happens to the midterm polling as a result of Bidenomics taking yet another step off the precipice towards recession. We're probably already in one. And this is, again, forecast by mainline economists, some of which work with legacy media firms. They're tied at the hip with them. And they take literal economic news marching orders from the Beijing Biden administration. Even they're saying we're probably already in a recession. They're just sugarcoating it, much like inflation was supposed to be transitory. Remember that one? Or it's just good for you. Hey, tighten your belt a little bit. There's an obesity crisis. If food costs more, maybe you'll eat one less hamburger this week. It's good for you. They're doing the same thing now with recession data as well, and possibly stagflation. We're probably headed for a recession. It'll be a shallow one. Don't worry. It'll be single dip. It'll be V-shaped. We'll recover very, very quickly. Don't worry about it. Because the Biden administration has shown such an acumen for economics. They're clearly led by people who are so with it when it comes to money issues. Here's the reality is that they can't balance anything. They don't understand what a balanced budget is. I see some of the never-Trumpers are still trying to blame Trump for the previous inflation data. Well, Trump printed trillions of dollars. Oh my God, as though he is the Fed, by the way, or sponsored bills to that effect. This is all his problem. Dude, if that were true, and thankfully it's not, and you don't understand jack fucking shit about money or the economy, then we'd be headed up towards core inflation of 20% probably, since Biden printed much more somewhat later. Thankfully, this is the result of Bidenomics. That's the good part, I hate to tell you. This is the result of funny money printing, attacks on the U.S. energy industry, the war in Ukraine being enjoined by the United States, despite Ukraine not even being a military ally, let alone a member of any significant economic bloc for the Western world. This is the result of the failed foreign and domestic policy by the Biden administration. It's also the result, in part, of lockdownerism. That's not Biden's fault directly. Of course, the President of the United States cannot force a state to lock down and say you can't do business, you can't trade, etc. Basically, it's limited to international and to some degree interstate travel. Remember when Biden said maybe we should stop all the flights to and from Florida because DeSantis won't toe the line on vaccination? Pepperidge Farm fucking remembers. Well, that's not the case. The president can encourage or discourage these things. Trump, towards the end, began discouraging them, saying, of course, we're wrecking the economy. There's no point anymore. Clearly, COVID has become endemic. There's nothing we can do about it. Just basically, if you're vulnerable, get a vaccine, which was the right way to go. As soon as Biden became a candidate, long before he even got into his asterisk position as steward, he started cajoling states and saying, by God, you better lock down. Keep people from going to work. It'll save exactly 0 lives, but it'll be meaningful, trust me. And it fits in right in with the WEF agenda. And the fact is, here's the horrible part. U.S. inflation is now at a 41-year high. A new record high recently. There are plenty of people who, in living memory, they've never suffered under an economy as bad as the one under Joe Biden. Again, technically speaking, inflation would be considered the highest possibly since the Great Depression already if you were using the old metric prior to the 1990s. Another big problem is the sticky numbers that are used within statistics, especially by the Krugmans of the world. There's a problem. If you look at the situation for what it really is, can the economy actually weather this kind of price hike without effectively collapsing at some point? If inflation were just to stay at 9.1%, let's say it stays exactly the way that it is, at what point do people in the middle class completely exhaust their savings and start taking out credit lines, which leads to a future problem, and or tightening their belts, not buying as much, and this leads to stagflation, even without the Fed raising interest rates, which now they're going to be wont to do. Obviously, their former rate increase didn't have an immediate effect. What are they going to do next? They're going to raise interest rates. They're going to stymie the economy further. They're going to stop some of the investment, some of the freewheeling money thing that goes on in D.C. and in Hollywood and in Wall Street. And partially that's okay. There's not a huge problem with that. Of course, interest rates at zero for nearly a decade and a half have caused their own economic problems. The problem is, do I trust these individuals to make good economic decisions that won't cause major fallout later on? No, of course not. Inflation is at 9.1%. Joblessness will probably begin inching up. I've been predicting that for some time. The price of basically everything is through the roof. If you look at gas prices alone, they're no shit. If gas prices are twice as high, people are traveling half as much potentially. At least if they're on that margin, the working class, lower middle class. That's a lot of people. That's tens and tens of millions of productive workers within the U.S. economy. A lot of people labeled middle class really aren't. They're basically just an inch above the working class to begin with. This is Bidenomics. This is, by the way, as well, what they want. That's about all. Peace out.